"I'm sorry, sir, but I can't allow you on this jet flight." The staffer's voice was firm, her skeptical eyes locked onto Barack Obama. Dressed casually in jeans and a button-down, Obama remained calm, but the tension in the air was undeniable. He handed over his credentials, clear proof of his right to board. Still, the staffer barely glanced at them. Passengers nearby exchanged uneasy glances. No one spoke up. The silence was deafening. Would Obama let this slide, or was the staffer about to realize her mistake in the most shocking way? Have you ever witnessed blatant discrimination? What did you do? Comment where you're watching from, like, and subscribe for more eye-opening stories. The sun glinted off the polished surfaces of private jets lined neatly along the tarmac at an exclusive airstrip in California. The rhythmic hum of jet engines mixed with the occasional chatter of affluent travelers, each adorned in designer suits and expensive accessories. The air was thick with an atmosphere of privilege, an unspoken understanding that this was a place for the elite. In this world of opulence, Barack Obama stood out not because of grandeur, but because of simplicity. Clad in a casual button-up shirt and jeans, he carried himself with quiet confidence, his modest demeanor a stark contrast to the extravagance around him. He was there for a speaking engagement, ready to address critical issues, but his unassuming appearance belied his significance. The stage was set, and the contrast between his humility and the exclusivity of the airstrip hinted at the tension to come. Barack Obama moved with the ease of a man accustomed to navigating spaces where he didn't always seem to fit. His thoughtful expression carried the weight of someone who had faced countless challenges, yet refused to be defined by them. As he made his way toward the waiting jet, his demeanor was calm and collected. His casual attire, a simple shirt and jeans, reflected his grounded nature, a stark departure from the pomp and formality expected in such a setting. To the bystanders, he appeared like any other man, blending into the crowd. This relatability made Obama a figure people could connect with, not just as a former president, but as a person who understood struggles and resilience. He wasn't shielded by status or privilege in this moment. Instead, he stood as a reflection of every person who has ever had to prove their worth in the face of skepticism. His presence in this space, so full of exclusivity, served as a reminder that humility could challenge even the most unyielding. Barrier's Karen Wallace, the staffer stationed at the boarding gate, wore a crisp uniform and carried an air of professionalism that seemed impenetrable. Her every gesture was rehearsed to perfection, polite smiles, measured words, and a demeanor designed to put travelers at ease. But beneath the polished exterior lay subtle signs of judgment. When Barack Obama approached with his identification, Karen's initial reaction was one of hesitation. Her polite smile faltered, her eyes darting between his casual attire and his credentials. She didn't outright question his legitimacy, but the slight raise of her brow and her overly scrutinizing gaze spoke volumes. "Sir, may I ask what your purpose is here today?" she inquired, her tone professional but carrying an unmistakable edge of skepticism. Her prejudice wasn't blatant. Instead, it manifested in microaggressions, the unnecessary double-checking of his identification, the subtle shift in her tone when speaking to him versus others. Karen embodied the type of bias that often hides in plain sight, cloaked in the guise of professionalism. Her actions reflected a broader societal issue, the quiet but pervasive discrimination that often goes unchecked. As the tension began to build, John Lewis, a fellow traveler waiting nearby, recognized Barack Obama instantly. John, an activist and firm believer in justice, couldn't ignore what was unfolding. His eyes narrowed as he watched Karen scrutinize Obama's credentials with unnecessary intensity. "That's Barack Obama," John said loudly, stepping forward. "You know, The former President of the United States. His voice was calm, but carried enough weight to draw the attention of those nearby. Karen turned, her smile tightening. "I understand, sir, but I have to follow protocol." "Protocol? Or assumptions?" John countered, his tone sharp enough to cut through the awkward silence. "Because from where I'm standing, this doesn't look like protocol. It looks like prejudice." Meanwhile, Tom Parker, another traveler observing from a distance, shifted uncomfortably. Unlike John, Tom wasn't ready to speak up. His gaze flickered between Karen, Obama, and the growing crowd. He felt the injustice, but hesitated, unsure whether to intervene or stay silent. Tom's internal struggle was evident. His silence mirrored the moral dilemma many face when witnessing discrimination. For now, he chose to remain an observer, but the seeds of doubt and discomfort began to grow within him. Barack Obama approached the boarding gate, handing over his identification with a warm smile. Karen Wallace took the document with practiced politeness, but her demeanor shifted almost imperceptibly. Her gaze lingered on his name, then flicked to his face and attire, her expression betraying a flicker of skepticism. "Sir, can you confirm the purpose of your visit today?" Karen asked, her tone steady but carrying an edge of doubt. "I'm here for a speaking engagement," Obama replied calmly, his voice measured and patient. Karen glanced at the identification again, then at Obama, as though searching for a discrepancy. "I see, and who invited you to this event?" Obama maintained his composure, answering her questions without hesitation, but the repetitive nature of her inquiries grew more pointed. Despite his calm demeanor, the interaction carried an unspoken discomfort, a sense that his presence was being scrutinized more than necessary. The subtle undertones in Karen's questions weren't lost on him. Her words were professional, but her behavior was unmistakable. Obama's patience became a quiet defiance, an effort to diffuse the tension without confrontation. Yet the discomfort was palpable, and the injustice of the moment began to weigh. On the scene, as the interaction unfolded, a quiet unease settled over the crowd nearby. Passengers glanced toward the gate, their curiosity piqued, but no one stepped forward. A woman pretended to look at her phone, her face carefully blank, while a man shifted awkwardly, pretending not to notice. The silence was deafening. The onlookers' unwillingness to get involved amplified the injustice, making Karen's actions feel even more isolating. Some watched with thinly veiled discomfort, silently questioning the fairness of the situation, but unwilling to risk confrontation. This collective inaction spoke volumes. It wasn't just Karen's prejudice on display, it was the complicity of a society that often looks the other way. Their silence was an unspoken agreement, a tacit allowance for the discrimination to continue. For Obama, the indifference of the crowd became another layer of the injustice he quietly endured. How do you think Barack Obama will respond to this subtle yet undeniable act of prejudice? Would you stay calm like him, or would you confront the injustice head-on? Have you ever faced a moment where you were unfairly judged? Share your experiences in the comments below. We'd love to hear your story. Barack Obama stepped forward confidently, his calm demeanor a testament to years of navigating challenging situations. His identification rested firmly in Karen Wallace's hands, but her grip tightened as her skepticism grew. The smile on her face was mechanical, devoid of warmth, her eyes darting between his photo and his casual attire. "Mr. Obama," she began, her tone perfectly polite, yet her words carried an edge. "I'm going to need a little more clarification. Can you confirm the purpose of your travel today?" Obama, ever composed, replied evenly, "I'm traveling to speak at an engagement in Los Angeles. Everything should be in order." Karen nodded, but there was no shift in her demeanor. Instead, she leaned slightly closer to scrutinize the ID, as if looking for a reason to doubt its authenticity. "I see. And who arranged this flight for you?" Are you sure you're on the correct manifest? The subtle insinuation was clear. Karen wasn't questioning the details. She was questioning his presence. The manifest should have my name listed, Obama said with quiet assurance, though the growing tension was unmistakable. Karen's brow furrowed. I'm just trying to follow protocol here. You understand? Of course. Security concerns require us to be thorough. Her words dripped with the veneer of professionalism. But the implication was unmistakable. She didn't believe he belonged. Karen's demeanor wasn't overtly hostile, but her actions spoke louder than her rehearsed phrases. The implicit bias was clear. Obama wasn't just another passenger to her. He was an exception, an anomaly to be questioned. As the conversation dragged on, the atmosphere thickened with discomfort. Obama's calm persistence became his quiet resistance, but the seeds of conflict were firmly planted. Around the boarding gate, the interaction between Barack Obama and Karen Wallace had drawn quiet attention. A middle-aged man in a tailored suit cast a fleeting glance before quickly turning away, pretending to check his watch. A woman holding a designer handbag glanced nervously in their direction. Her lips pursed, but she made no move to intervene. The hushed murmur of private conversations barely masked the tension in the air. Some passengers whispered amongst themselves, their curiosity evident, yet no one stepped forward. The hesitation wasn't born of malice, but fear, the fear of involvement, of saying the wrong thing, or simply breaking the unspoken rule of staying in one's lane. Each person's inaction became a thread in a web of complicity, allowing the scene to unfold unchecked. A young man standing nearby pulled out his phone, not to intervene, but to scroll mindlessly, his discomfort manifesting in avoidance. The unspoken sentiment seemed universal. This isn't my place to interfere. For Obama, the silence was louder than Karen's questioning. The collective indifference of the bystanders was a stark reminder of the societal complicity that often enables injustice to thrive. Their inaction didn't just echo apathy, it underscored a broader issue: how systemic discrimination is not only enforced by the active, but perpetuated by the passive. As Karen's questioning persisted, the weight of the bystanders' silence hung heavy, deepening the injustice and isolating Obama further in the moment. Barack Obama stood firm, his face calm and composed, though the weight of Karen's persistent questioning bore down on him. Each word she spoke, each glance laced with doubt, felt like a quiet reminder of battles he thought he'd long overcome. Yet he knew that losing his composure here would only fuel the narrative that so many like Karen subconsciously held. Inside, though, frustration simmered. Why must I, of all people, prove myself again and again, he thought. He had presented everything she'd asked for, credentials that should have been more than enough, but still, it wasn't sufficient. As Karen continued her thinly veiled interrogation, memories of past experiences surfaced in his mind. He recalled being a young law student, stopped at a department store by a security guard who assumed he was loitering. He remembered the countless moments during his youth when a room would fall silent the moment he entered, the unspoken judgments as palpable as they were unchallenged. These memories weren't just scars, they were lessons. They had taught him the importance of composure, the necessity of patience, and the power of refusing to let others define him. Those experiences had shaped him into the man he was today, capable of maintaining his dignity even under the shadow of prejudice. Karen's voice broke through his thoughts. "Mr. Obama, I'm just doing my job. You understand, don't you?" Her words were carefully chosen, wrapped in politeness but brimming with dismissal. Obama met her gaze, his calm expression unwavering. "I understand," he replied evenly, "but I also know when I'm being treated differently." There was a pause, brief but powerful. Karen's composure flickered for just a moment, The frustration inside him didn't dissipate, but Obama knew this wasn't just about him. It was about what moments like this represented for so many others who didn't have the same platform to push back. He wouldn't let anger dictate his actions. Instead, he let his quiet strength stand as a statement against her doubts. In his silence and self-control, Obama displayed resilience, a refusal to bend, not to Karen's assumptions, and not to the system that allowed them to thrive. John Lewis, a seasoned traveler and a man who knew a thing or two about standing up to injustice, had been watching the interaction unfold. His initial instinct was to remain silent, but as Karen's tone grew sharper and her skepticism more apparent, he felt a surge of indignation. This wasn't just a routine misunderstanding, it was an affront to a man who had earned respect and recognition around the globe. Clearing his throat, John stepped forward, his voice steady but unmistakably firm. "Excuse me," he said, his tone cutting through the tense atmosphere like a knife. "Is there a problem here?" Karen looked up, momentarily startled by the interruption. "Not at all," she replied, her professional demeanor intact. "I'm simply following protocol and verifying Mr. Obama's credentials." John crossed his arms, his piercing gaze fixed on her. "Protocol? That's Barack Obama, the former President of the United States. What exactly are you questioning here?" Karen's composure faltered for a brief moment, but she quickly recovered. "Sir, I'm treating Mr. Obama the same way I would treat anyone else. Security is a top priority, and I'm just doing my job." John's voice grew louder, more resolute. "Doing your job, or making assumptions based on how someone looks? Because from where I'm standing, it doesn't seem like you're questioning anyone else this thoroughly." The crowd began to shift. Eyes that had previously been averted now turned toward the growing confrontation. Whispers rippled through. The onlookers, as John's words challenged the thin veil of professionalism Karen had used to mask her actions. Karen's face tightened, and her tone grew defensive. "Sir, I don't appreciate being accused of anything. This is standard protocol, nothing more." "Standard protocol doesn't involve singling people out based on their appearance," John shot back. His voice carried the frustration of someone who had witnessed this scenario too many times before. "You're not just questioning him, you're questioning his right to be here." The tension was palpable, the crowd now fully engaged. Karen's insistence on protocol was no longer just a personal stance. It was a reflection of a deeper, systemic problem. John's intervention had shifted the dynamic, forcing the injustice into the open, where it could no longer be ignored. Karen's shoulders squared, her grip tightening on the clipboard she held as though it could shield her from the growing scrutiny. Her voice, still professional, now carried a distinct edge. "I assure you, sir, my actions are not based on any personal bias. I'm simply following standard protocol to ensure the safety and integrity of this flight." Her defensiveness was palpable, a shield against the accusations that had now drawn the attention of the entire crowd. Yet her words did little to address the deeper issue at play. John Lewis, undeterred, pressed on. "Standard protocol?" he repeated, his tone laced with disbelief. "Standard protocol doesn't look like this. If it were truly standard, then why aren't you questioning anyone else with this same intensity? Or is this particular protocol reserved for people who don't fit your expectations?" Karen's lips thinned, and she took a small step back. "I'm not going to stand here and have my integrity questioned," she replied tersely. "This isn't about expectations or appearances. It's about ensuring the rules are followed." The crowd shifted uneasily, the murmurs growing louder. It was clear to those watching that Karen wasn't just defending her actions. She was defending a system that allowed those actions to go unchallenged. Her insistence on rules and procedures revealed how discrimination often hides behind the facade of policies, cloaking prejudice in a guise of legitimacy. Barack Obama, who had remained silent throughout the escalating confrontation, finally spoke, his voice calm but deliberate. "I understand the importance of following procedures," he began, "but when those procedures are applied unevenly, they stop being about security and start being about something else entirely." Karen's eyes flicked to him, her composure cracking slightly under the weight of his words. "I don't see how I've applied anything unevenly," she countered, though her voice lacked the conviction it had before. The crowd was no longer just an audience. They were witnesses to a larger issue that Karen's behavior epitomized. This wasn't merely a personal failing. It was a symptom of systemic racism, the kind that lurks in everyday interactions, disguised as routine and professionalism. Her defensiveness was not just about saving face. It was an attempt to preserve the status quo, a system that allowed prejudice to thrive unchecked, protected by the veil of procedure. As Karen's words hung in the air, Barack Obama's calm expression didn't falter, but behind his composed exterior, his mind was racing. The moment felt achingly familiar, as though he had stepped into a scene he'd experienced countless times before. His memory pulled him back to his college days, walking into a high-end department store in downtown Chicago. He was wearing a simple hoodie, his books tucked under one arm, when a store clerk trailed him through the aisles. She didn't say anything, but her presence loomed, watching, waiting, assuming. He remembered how he'd kept his head high, pretending not to notice, but the sting of her suspicion lingered long after he'd left the store. The scene shifted in his mind, another moment, another place. He was a young senator, walking into a private event at a prestigious club. The doorman had looked him up and down, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Are you with the catering staff?" the man had asked, his voice polite but condescending. Obama had smiled politely, suppressing the frustration bubbling beneath the surface, and responded, "No, I'm here to speak to the members." As Karen continued her questioning, her tone laced with doubt, these memories overlapped with the present moment. The accumulation of these experiences, the quiet suspicions, the unspoken assumptions, had shaped him, but they had not broken him. Obama's mind returned to the present. The weight of these past injustices only made his resolve stronger. He had long since learned that anger would only feed the stereotypes people like Karen expected to see. Instead, his calm demeanor was his armor, his patience a powerful form of resistance. But the scars remained. They weren't visible, but they were deeply etched into his memory, a reminder of how far society still had to go. Each moment of prejudice, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, added to the burden he carried, a burden that countless others carried alongside him. Yet in this moment, Obama didn't allow those scars to control him. They were a testament to his resilience, and as Karen's words continued to echo around him, he knew that his quiet strength would speak louder than her doubts ever could. Tom Parker stood a few feet away, clutching his briefcase tightly as he watched the interaction unfold. Initially, he had convinced himself that it wasn't his business. He wasn't the type to meddle in situations that didn't directly involve him. But as the conversation between Karen and Barack Obama stretched on, an uncomfortable knot began to form in his stomach. At first, he rationalized Karen's behavior as part of her job. Maybe she really is just following protocol, he thought, shifting his weight awkwardly from one foot to the other. But the longer he watched, the harder it became to ignore the subtle tension in her tone, the way her questions seemed to imply doubt rather than genuine inquiry. The quiet persistence of her skepticism, coupled with Obama's calm yet resolute responses, made it clear that this wasn't just about procedure. Tom's unease grew when John Lewis stepped forward. The confidence in John's voice was undeniable, and his words struck a chord. "Why aren't you questioning anyone else this thoroughly?" John had asked, his tone direct and unapologetic. Tom glanced around the room, realizing that John was right. No one else had been subjected to such scrutiny. The realization hit him like a wave. He felt a pang of guilt. "Why am I just standing here?" he wondered. The words echoed in his mind, but fear and hesitation kept him rooted in place. What if I said the wrong thing? What if I escalated the situation? What if everyone turned their attention to me instead? Tom's internal conflict was one shared by many. He wanted to do the right thing, but the fear of standing out, of making a mistake, was paralyzing. Yet as he watched Obama's calm demeanor in the face of unfair treatment, something shifted within him. Obama's unwavering poise in the face of prejudice was both inspiring and challenging. For the first time, Tom began to question not just Karen's actions, but his own silence. Am I complicit in this injustice simply by doing nothing? The thought gnawed at him, unraveling the excuses he had clung to moments before. Though he didn't act yet, the unease in his heart was undeniable. Tom was beginning to see the bigger picture, the quiet injustice that had played out countless times before, enabled by the silence of people like him. And for the first time, he started to wonder if his silence was as much a part of the problem as Karen's actions. Have you ever felt powerless in the face of blatant prejudice? Have you hesitated to speak up, even when you knew it was the right thing to do? How do you think John's intervention might change the outcome? What would you do if you were in Barack Obama's shoes? Let us know in the comments below. The air was thick with tension as Barack Obama took a measured step forward, his calm demeanor unshaken despite the growing unease around him. He had been quietly enduring Karen's persistent questioning, but now, as the murmurs in the crowd grew louder and John Lewis's voice rang clear in defense of him, Obama knew it was time to speak. "Ms. Wallace," he began, his voice even, but firm. The tone wasn't confrontational, but it carried the weight of authority, an authority he rarely needed to assert, but one that was undeniable. Karen turned to him, visibly flustered. "Yes, Mr. Obama?" she replied, her professional facade struggling to hold under the pressure. "I've answered your questions, provided my identification, and explained my purpose here," Obama said, his words deliberate and measured. "Can you explain to me, then, why my presence requires this level of scrutiny?" Karen hesitated, her gaze flickering to the growing crowd. "It's just standard procedure, sir," she stammered, clutching the clipboard in her hands as if it could shield her from the piercing gaze of the man standing before her. "Standard procedure," Obama repeated, his voice calm but pointed. "Then I assume everyone else boarding this flight has been subjected to the same level of questioning." The crowd grew silent, the weight of his words settling heavily over the scene. Karen's lips parted as though to respond, but no words came. Her hesitation was telling, and the tension in the air grew palpable. Obama didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. His steady gaze and dignified tone cut through the thin veil of professionalism Karen had been hiding behind. "I understand the importance of security," he continued, "but I also understand when it's being used as a justification for something else entirely." The surrounding onlookers, once passive, now watched intently, sensing the gravity of the moment. Obama's presence filled the space, and though he spoke with calm and dignity, his words carried an unspoken demand: accountability. As Obama's calm but pointed words echoed through the air, a man in the crowd discreetly pulled out his phone and began recording. The quiet beeping sound of the camera starting was faint, but its implications were thunderous. The small red light blinking on the screen signaled that this moment would not remain confined to the airstrip. It would soon be seen by countless others. Karen Wallace caught sight of the phone, and her composure began to falter. Her professional demeanor, which had been her shield throughout the interaction, started to crack. She shifted uncomfortably, gripping her clipboard as though it might anchor her in the escalating storm of scrutiny. "Mr. Obama," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I don't mean to cause any trouble here. I'm simply doing my job. It's nothing personal, I assure you." Obama held her gaze, unyielding but never aggressive. "I'm not questioning your intention, Ms. Wallace," he said, his voice calm yet authoritative. "But I am questioning the application of your so-called standard procedure. If it's not personal, why does it feel so targeted?" The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. Bystanders who had been hesitant to engage now leaned in closer, their curiosity turning into concern. Some nodded in agreement with Obama's words, while others whispered among themselves, their glances darting between Karen and the man who stood before her with quiet dignity. Karen opened her mouth to respond, but hesitated. Her rehearsed excuses, phrases like security protocol and standard procedure, suddenly seemed flimsy and inadequate under the weight of Obama's questions. She stammered, I'm just trying to follow the rules, Mr. Obama. I didn't mean to offend you." "But you did," Obama replied gently, his words firm but not unkind. "And you didn't just offend me. You reinforced a pattern that many people face every day, a pattern that says someone doesn't belong simply because of how they look." The weight of his statement landed heavily, not just on Karen, but on the entire crowd. The phone camera continued to record, capturing every word, every nuance, every crack in Karen's facade. Her defensiveness crumbled under the gaze of public accountability, and for the first time, she looked genuinely unsure of herself. Barack Obama stood still for a moment, letting the silence settle as Karen's stammered excuses faded into the background. The energy of the crowd had shifted. What started as passive curiosity had become rapt attention. The phones now aimed at him weren't just recording a confrontation. They were capturing a moment of reckoning. Obama turned slightly, addressing not Karen but the crowd. His voice, steady and resolute, carried over the murmurs, drawing every eye to him. "This isn't just about me," he began, his tone calm, but commanding. "What happened here today is a reflection of something far bigger, a pattern that too many people face every single day, a pattern that tells them they don't belong, that they need to prove themselves over and over again, just to be treated as equals." The crowd grew quiet, the weight of his words sinking in. Obama continued, his gaze sweeping over the faces before him. "I've experienced this before. I've walked into stores and been followed by security guards. I've been asked if I'm in the right place at events where I was the keynote speaker, and I know I'm not alone in this." He paused, his expression softening but his voice unwavering. "The truth is, prejudice isn't always loud. It doesn't always shout or demand attention. Sometimes it's subtle, a glance, a question, a hesitation. But that doesn't make it any less harmful." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. People nodded, their expressions shifting from mere curiosity to understanding. "We have a choice in moments like these," Obama continued, his voice rising slightly, not in anger but in conviction. "We can stay silent, pretend we didn't, see it and let it happen again, or we can speak up, not just for ourselves, but for those who don't have the same platform or voice." He turned back to Karen, his expression not one of anger, but of hope. "And to those who find themselves in positions of power, even small ones, I ask you to reflect on how you use it, because the way we treat each other in moments like this defines not just who we are, but who we aspire to be." The crowd broke into quiet applause, the tension giving way to a sense of purpose. Obama's words had transformed the moment from one of division to a call for unity and dignity, leaving everyone present with a choice, to be passive or to stand for justice. The video, captured by an observant bystander, was uploaded to social media within minutes. At first, It was just another post in the endless stream of online content, a few dozen views, a handful of comments. But something about the interaction struck a nerve. The quiet dignity with which Barack Obama confronted injustice resonated deeply, and soon the video began to spread. By the end of the day, hashtags like "Dignity in Action," "Stand for Justice," and "Bias Exposed" were trending across platforms. The footage of Karen questioning Obama, followed by his powerful words to the crowd, had sparked a wildfire of reactions. People from all walks of life weighed in, sharing their own experiences with prejudice and calling for accountability. "This isn't just about Obama," one tweet read. "It's about how we all enable these microaggressions to persist." Time for a change. Another comment on the video struck an even deeper chord. If a man like Obama, with all his achievements, still faces this kind of scrutiny, what does that say about how we treat others without his platform? Media outlets picked up the story, adding to the momentum. Headlines like "Former President Confronts Discrimination with Grace" and "Viral Video Sparks Debate on Implicit Bias" flooded news feeds. Talk shows and podcasts delved into the incident, analyzing not only Karen's actions, but the systemic issues they reflected. Karen's behavior became a focal point of the conversation. Her insistence on protocol was dissected and critiqued, with many pointing out how similar excuses had been used to justify discriminatory practices in workplaces, schools, and other institutions. But it wasn't just about pointing fingers. It was about the bigger picture. Obama's words had turned the moment into a catalyst for reflection. People began to ask hard questions about their own biases and the ways they might have been complicit in allowing such behavior to continue unchecked. What had started as a tense confrontation on a quiet tarmac had evolved into a national conversation. The video was no longer just a record of an isolated event. It had become a mirror held up to society, forcing everyone to examine their role in the fight for justice and equality. John Lewis, standing firm beside Barack Obama, continued his vocal support, his resolve unshaken. He had seen too many instances of injustice in his life to stay quiet now. "This isn't about protocol," he said, his voice carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. "This is about making assumptions that never should have been made in the first place." Karen's face tightened at his words, her earlier confidence now replaced with visible discomfort. The crowd, emboldened by John's unwavering stance, began murmuring in agreement. The quiet rustling of dissatisfaction grew louder, making it clear that Karen was quickly losing the room. It was then that Tom Parker, who had been standing silently on the sidelines, finally stepped forward. The hesitant, conflicted man who had watched passively just moments ago was now ready to speak. His voice wavered slightly, but there was no mistaking the conviction in his words. "John's right," Tom began, his eyes fixed on Karen. "What's happening here isn't just about following rules. It's about treating someone as though they don't belong, despite every piece of evidence to the contrary. And it's wrong." Karen turned toward him, her expression a mix of shock and indignation. "I'm not treating anyone unfairly," she replied defensively. "I'm just trying to do my job." "No," Tom said, his voice growing steadier. "You're trying to justify something that shouldn't need justification. This man has more than proven who he is. The fact that you're still questioning him, still doubting him, that's the problem." The crowd erupted in murmurs of agreement, and Tom's words carried a surprising weight. His transformation from hesitant observer to outspoken ally was palpable. It wasn't just about standing up for Obama. It was about recognizing his own complicity in the silence that had allowed such moments to persist. "Karen," Tom continued, his voice firm, "we have to be better than this. All of us." Tom's words, paired with John's continued support, solidified the crowd's shift. The momentum had turned, and the collective strength of their voices left Karen with no room to hide behind her earlier excuses. It was a powerful reminder that standing up even belatedly could still make a difference. As the tension began to dissipate and the crowd settled into a hushed anticipation, the airline's senior staff arrived on the scene. A middle-aged manager in a crisp navy suit stepped forward, her expression a mixture of concern and embarrassment. "Mr. Obama," she began, her tone apologetic, "on behalf of the airline, I want to sincerely apologize for this misunderstanding. We deeply regret the inconvenience caused to you today." She gestured toward the plane, now ready for boarding. "We'd like to ensure you're accommodated immediately. Please, let us make this right." Obama listened attentively, his hands clasped in front of him, his expression calm but resolute. When the manager finished speaking, he paused, taking a moment to choose his words carefully. "I appreciate your apology," he said, his voice steady and composed, "but this isn't just about me. It's about what this situation represents for so many others who don't have the privilege of being recognized or the platform to address it." The manager's polite smile faltered slightly as the weight of his words sank in. "I've answered the questions, provided my identification, and done everything required of me," Obama continued. "But the assumptions that led to this moment shouldn't have been made in the first place. Boarding this plane now wouldn't change what just happened. It wouldn't address the larger issue at hand." The crowd stood in silence, hanging on his every word. Karen stood to the side, visibly uneasy but saying nothing. Obama turned toward the gathered onlookers. "When we choose convenience over principle, we risk letting these moments slip by without making them count. That's not a choice I'm willing to make." With that, Obama made his decision. "I'll make other arrangements," he said firmly, addressing the manager. "This isn't about the flight anymore. It's about standing for something more important than getting to my destination on time." His words resonated deeply, and the crowd broke into soft applause, a show of respect for his unwavering integrity. As he walked away from the gate, refusing the path of least resistance, his choice became a symbol, a reminder that dignity and justice are worth far more than any immediate comfort. In that moment, Barack Obama turned a moment of personal injustice into a powerful stand for principle, leaving an impression that would linger in the minds of everyone who had witnessed. The video of the incident, now circulating widely on social media, quickly became a flashpoint for public outrage. Karen Wallace, once a faceless employee at a private airline, was thrust into the harsh glare of public scrutiny. Her name trended across platforms, paired with hashtags like implicit bias, accountability now, and justice for Obama. The footage painted a vivid and undeniable picture of her actions, leaving little room for misinterpretation or excuses. The backlash was swift and unrelenting. Comments flooded in, reflecting a wide spectrum of emotions: anger, frustration, disappointment, and calls for systemic change. Some users focused on Karen's specific behavior, labeling it as discriminatory, while others broadened the conversation, pointing out how her actions symbolized a much deeper problem. "This isn't just about one person," one user wrote. In a tweet that garnered over 100,000 likes, "Karen is a symptom of a much bigger issue we all need to confront. Implicit bias like this happens every day. The difference here is that it was caught on camera. Media outlets picked up the story, replaying the video on repeat and dissecting it in panel discussions. Advocacy groups joined the fray, using the moment to highlight the pervasive nature of systemic prejudice and the need for institutional reforms. The conversation extended far beyond Karen herself, becoming a rallying cry for societal change. Faced with mounting pressure from both the public and media, the airline released a formal statement. "We deeply regret the incident involving Mr. Barack Obama and are committed to ensuring such situations are not repeated. Effective immediately, the staff member involved has been suspended pending a thorough investigation." While the statement sought to assuage public anger, many viewed it as a reactive measure rather than a proactive stance. For Karen, the weight of her actions began to sink in as she became the subject of endless news reports, opinion pieces, and online debates. Her carefully curated professionalism, which she had relied on to shield herself, was now under intense scrutiny. Articles dissected her behavior, contrasting it with the lenient treatment given to other passengers. Initially, Karen attempted to defend herself, stating in an interview, "I was just following protocol. This wasn't personal." But her words rang hollow as the inconsistencies in her actions became glaringly apparent. How could protocol explain why only one passenger faced such rigorous questioning? The growing criticism wasn't just personal, it exposed a broader societal problem. Karen's actions were no longer viewed as an isolated incident, but as a reflection of the everyday prejudices embedded in workplaces, schools, and public spaces. The situation highlighted the urgent need for systemic change, from implementing robust bias training programs to fostering a culture of accountability at every level. For Karen, this reckoning was a painful and public reminder of how even subtle biases can have far-reaching consequences. For everyone watching, it served as a wake-up call, a catalyst for deeper conversations about prejudice and the urgent work still needed to create a fair and equitable society. The video, now etched into the public consciousness, became a powerful reminder of the costs of inaction and the transformative potential of confronting injustice head-on. What would you do if you witnessed such blatant unfairness? Would you remain silent, or would you choose to speak up? Do you think Karen's actions reflect a larger issue in society, a problem that goes beyond one individual? Public accountability has the power to spark change, but only if we recognize the systemic issues that allow such biases to thrive. Could this moment inspire broader reform, not just for one airline, but for workplaces and communities everywhere? Share your thoughts below. Let us know what you think about this incident and how we can all play a part in creating a more just and equitable world. The video of Barack Obama's encounter with Karen Wallace spread across social media like a spark, igniting dry grass. Within hours, it had been shared millions of times, its reach extending far beyond the airstrip where it had been filmed. News outlets picked up the story, dissecting the incident and playing the footage on repeat. What struck viewers most wasn't just Karen's actions, but Obama's dignified response. His calm demeanor and piercing words resonated deeply, reminding the world of the systemic challenges faced by so many, even someone as accomplished as him. Hashtags like "Why Dignity in Action," "Stand for Justice," and "Everyday Bias" began trending across platforms. People from all walks of life shared their thoughts, some expressing outrage, others recounting their own similar experiences. One tweet, shared thousands of times, read, "If this can happen to Barack Obama, imagine what happens to those without." His platform: "This is the reality of implicit bias." Social media users debated the nuances of the interaction. Some defended Karen, insisting she was just doing her job, while many others pointed out how her actions reflected broader issues of systemic racism and unconscious prejudice. This is bigger than one person or one incident, a viral comment on the video explained. It's about addressing the assumptions we make about people based on their appearance and the structures that allow those assumptions to dictate actions. Organizations and public figures joined the conversation. Advocacy groups used the moment to highlight the need for implicit bias training and systemic reform. Celebrities and influencers voiced their support, amplifying Obama's call for justice and equality. Meanwhile, in classrooms, boardrooms, and living rooms across the nation, people began having difficult but necessary conversations about privilege, prejudice, and how they might contribute to change. The incident had evolved from a personal confrontation to a national rallying cry. It was no longer just about what had happened at a private airstrip. It was about what happens every day in workplaces, schools, and public spaces, and how society must address it. As the video continued to circulate, its message became clear. Moments of injustice, when exposed, can become powerful opportunities for awareness, reflection, and ultimately, change. The pressure on the airline was immediate and overwhelming. As the video continued to circulate online, the calls for accountability grew louder and more insistent. Social media platforms became a hub for heated debates and impassioned demands, with hashtags like airline bias, hold them accountable, and justice for all dominating timelines. The footage of Barack Obama calmly addressing the discrimination he faced resonated globally, amplifying the voices of those who had long felt marginalized. The airline's reputation, once a symbol of exclusivity and professionalism, now hung by a thread. Silence was no longer an option. Within 24 hours, the airline released an official statement. We deeply regret the incident involving Mr. Barack Obama and extend our sincerest apologies to him and to everyone affected by this situation. The actions of our staff member, Karen Wallace, do not reflect the values or policies of our company. Effective immediately, she has been suspended pending a full investigation. The statement aimed to quell the public uproar, but it wasn't without its critics. While some viewed it as a necessary first step toward accountability, others questioned its sincerity. Why does it take public outrage to address something so clearly wrong? Tweeted a prominent activist, whose comment quickly garnered thousands of likes and retweets. This apology should have come without the spotlight. The system needs more than reactive fixes. It needs proactive reform. Karen's suspension became a focal point of the broader conversation. For many, it was seen as a necessary consequence, a tangible example of accountability. However, others used the moment to shift the narrative beyond the individual, emphasizing the systemic nature of the problem. Karen isn't the root of the issue, a viral post read. She's a symptom of a larger system that needs reform. Let's not stop with her. Let's demand better across the board. The airline, acutely aware of the ongoing scrutiny, knew that Karen's suspension alone would not suffice. Internally, discussions began about overhauling policies and introducing long-overdue training programs to address implicit bias. For the airline, this marked a pivotal moment. It wasn't just about addressing one employee's actions. It was about acknowledging the structural failures that allowed such actions to occur in the first place. As the news spread, the message became clear. When enough people demand justice, change becomes inevitable. Karen's suspension wasn't just a punishment for her actions. It was a signal that the days of letting such behavior go unchallenged were coming to an end. It also served as a reminder to companies everywhere that in today's interconnected world, accountability isn't optional, it's essential. The uproar surrounding the incident didn't deter Barack Obama. Instead, he saw it as an opportunity to address something far greater than a single moment of discrimination. At his next public event, a much-anticipated conference on leadership and equality, the former president took the stage to thunderous applause. The energy in the room was palpable. Everyone was eager to hear his perspective on the incident that had captured the nation's attention. Obama began his speech with characteristic humility, acknowledging the overwhelming support he had received in the aftermath of the event. First, let me thank all of you for standing with me, not just for me, but for the principles that moments like this bring to light, he said, his tone measured and sincere. He didn't shy away from recounting the airstrip incident. He described the subtle doubts, the microaggressions, and the uncomfortable silence from onlookers. "That moment wasn't unique," he said, his voice steady. "It's one that so many people face every day, in countless ways, big and small. And too often, these moments go unnoticed, unspoken, and unaddressed." Obama shifted his focus to the crowd, his words resonating deeply. "The question we have to ask ourselves is, what kind of society do we want to build? One where we judge people based on the surface, or one where we see the depth of their humanity, their dignity, and their worth?" He shared personal anecdotes of times he had faced similar prejudice, weaving them into a broader call for action. "Prejudice isn't just about individuals," he explained. "It's about systems that allow these behaviors to persist, unchecked and unquestioned." The audience sat in rapt silence, absorbing his words. "But here's the thing," Obama continued. "Moments like this, as painful as they are, can also be transformative. They force us to confront uncomfortable truths and, more importantly, to do something about them." He ended his speech with a challenge. "Let's use this moment to build something better. Let's start conversations, challenge assumptions, and create spaces where respect and dignity aren't exceptions. They're the rule." The room erupted in applause, but the impact of his words extended far beyond those walls, inspiring hope and sparking discussions about the changes needed to create a more equitable society. Under mounting public pressure and intense media scrutiny, the airline was forced to confront the broader implications of the incident involving Barack Obama. While Karen Wallace's suspension was an immediate step, it became clear that the problem extended beyond one individual. The company's leadership recognized that meaningful change required systemic reform, not just reactive measures. Within weeks, the airline announced a comprehensive overhaul of its internal policies. In a detailed press release, the CEO stated, "The events surrounding Mr. Obama's experience have highlighted areas where we must do better. We are committed to ensuring that our company fosters a culture of inclusion, respect, and fairness." The airline outlined several key initiatives. Mandatory bias training. Every employee, from frontline staff to senior management, would undergo extensive training designed to recognize and address implicit biases. Revised customer interaction guidelines. New protocols were introduced to ensure that all passengers were treated equitably, with clear guidelines for handling, identification, and verification processes. Inclusion. Task Force. A dedicated team was formed to oversee diversity and inclusion initiatives, regularly reviewing company policies and practices to prevent similar incidents in the future. These measures were met with a mix of praise and skepticism. Advocacy groups applauded the airline's commitment to change, but emphasized the need for transparency and accountability in implementing these policies. "This is a step in the right direction," one advocate said, "but words are not enough. Action and follow-through are what matter most." The airline's willingness to take responsibility and enact change became a symbol of the potential for systemic reform. While the incident had begun as a moment of personal injustice, it had grown into a catalyst for corporate accountability, sparking hope that other organizations might follow suit. Later that evening, Barack Obama sat with his family in the living room of their home, the warmth of their presence a stark contrast to the tension of the day. The house was quiet, except for the soft murmur of the news playing in the background. The story of the airstrip incident dominated every channel, but for now, Obama had turned his attention inward. Michelle sat beside him, her hand resting gently on his. "You handled it with such grace," she said, her voice filled with admiration, "but I can see it weighed on you." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It's not the first time, and it won't be the last," he replied softly. "But today, it felt different. It wasn't just about me. It was about something bigger, and the response, it shows that people are ready to have these conversations, even if they're uncomfortable." Malia and Sasha, sitting across from him, chimed in. "Dad, everyone's talking about how powerful your words were," Malia said. "People are sharing their own stories because of what you said. That has to mean something, right?" "It does," Obama said with a small smile, pride mingling with the weariness in his eyes. "But it also reminds me how far we still have to go. Moments like this shouldn't have to happen to spark change." Michelle leaned closer, her voice steady and full of conviction. "And that's why your voice matters. You showed the world that dignity and justice are worth standing up for, no matter the cost." Obama looked at his family, his resolve strengthened by their unwavering support. In their presence, he found the resilience to keep fighting, not just for himself, but for everyone who deserved better. The strength they gave him was a reminder that love and unity could endure even the heaviest challenges. The airstrip incident, once confined to a single tense encounter, had grown into a nationwide call for reflection and reform. Barack Obama's composed response, paired with the public outrage and the airline's subsequent actions, became a catalyst for broader discussions on racial equity. It was no longer just about one man's experience. It was about the experiences of countless others who faced similar injustices daily, often without the benefit of a public platform to amplify their voices. Workplaces across industries took notice. Corporate leaders began revisiting their training programs, acknowledging the need for deeper and more authentic conversations about implicit bias, systemic racism, and the subtle ways prejudice manifests in everyday interactions. Diversity and inclusion initiatives, often treated as a checkbox exercise, were scrutinized with renewed urgency. Companies pledged to invest in ongoing education and foster cultures where respect and fairness weren't aspirational values, but foundational principles. In educational settings, schools introduced workshops on inclusion and empathy, ensuring that future generations grew up understanding the importance of treating others with dignity and respect. Teachers used the viral video as a teaching tool, prompting students to discuss the incident and reflect on how they could challenge prejudice in their own lives. Policymakers, spurred by the public dialogue, began drafting initiatives aimed at addressing systemic inequities. From legislative reforms to targeted community programs, the ripple effect extended into tangible action, showing that public accountability could lead to meaningful change. On social media, the video continued to circulate, sparking a flood of personal stories. People from all walks of life shared their own experiences with discrimination, uniting in their call for accountability and progress. This collective acknowledgement of shared struggles created a sense of solidarity and urgency that transcended borders and backgrounds. The ripple effect, born of one moment of injustice, underscored the transformative power of confronting prejudice. Head-on, it demonstrated that when individuals stand up and demand better, they can inspire changes that reverberate through communities, institutions, and even nations, creating a path toward a more just and equitable future. Have you ever witnessed or been part of a moment that sparked real change? How did it impact you, and what did you learn from it? This incident teaches us that standing up to injustice, no matter how small the act, can create ripples of transformation. What steps can we all take to ensure fairness and dignity for everyone? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, take a moment to like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let's keep the conversation going. Your voice matters in creating a more just and equitable world. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that inspire change, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Together we can make a difference.